Okay, I came across a report yesterday involving J.K. Rowling, who really needs no introduction, one of the world's best known writers of Harry Potter fame. And she's found herself in hot water for her position in defending another woman on a transgender controversy. I'm going to read out the report from The Guardian to give the context of this. I'll maybe put a link to that then, share my own thoughts, because I think this is actually symbolic of a wider issue. J.K. Rowling and row over court ruling on transgender issues. Having not tweeted since November, J.K. Rowling broke her Twitter silence to speak out in support of a researcher who lost an employment tribunal case for using offensive and exclusionary language on Twitter. Rowling tweeted about Maya Forstater, who lost her job at an international think tank after a series of tweets, including one in which she said, "Men cannot change into women." Rowling, who has 14.6 million followers. Is it Rowling or Rowling? I think it's Rowling. Has 14.6 million followers, said in the tweet, "Dress however you please, call yourself whatever you like, sleep with any consenting adult who'll have you, live your best life in peace and security, but force women out of their jobs for stating that sex is real. Stand with Maya, this is not a drill." So basically, she's supporting this woman in the situation that she's in. Forstater lost her job as a visiting fellow at the Centre for Global Development, an anti-poverty think tank that has offices in London and Washington. She was accused at the Employment Tribunal of having retweeted transphobic material, including a newspaper cartoon of a person flashing to women at a London swimming pool with the caption, "It's all right, it's a woman's penis." Court documents show that she had previously tweeted that it is unfair and unsafe for trans women to compete in women's sport. She was also accused of gendering a non-binary person, Gregor Murray. Forstater responded, "I had simply forgotten that this man demands to be referred to by the plural pronouns they and them. In reality, Murray is a man. Women and children in particular should not be forced to lie or obfuscate about someone's sex." Murray is Scotland's only openly trans elected representative and was previously suspended after using abusive language towards a woman in their constituency and also calling her a TERF, which is trans exclusionary radical feminist. Murray apologised but said TERF should not be considered an offensive word. James Taylor, the ruling judge, concluded that Forstater did not have the right to ignore or deny the legal rights of trans people and said her tweets were incompatible with human dignity and fundamental rights of others. Judge Taylor said Forstater had not acknowledged the enormous pain that can be caused by misgendering a person. If she had won the case, Taylor said it would have set a precedent that would prevent employers from dismissing staff expressing similar views about LGBTQ plus rights. Forstater tweeted, "That's a mouthful, that's why I responded that way." Forstater tweeted after the ruling to say she was shocked. She wrote, "Judgment received. Bad news for now. Stonewall Law won this round. Here is my statement in thread form. I struggle to express the shock and disbelief I feel at reading this judgment." Rowling had previously been criticised for liking a tweet that referred to trans women as men in dresses. Rowling's representatives later blamed a middle-aged moment for the like and said it stemmed from the author mishandling her phone. Right, so this is the latest kind of battleground in the culture wars, but it's curious because it's not a traditional left-right thing. What we are seeing here is left-wing women, often who would describe themselves as feminists, are finding themselves the target of the trans lobby for the positions that they're taking. Let me just get this out of the way. My sympathies lie 100% with J.K. Rowling on this and with the woman in question. Um, I hadn't even realised this until I read the article in full there, that this cartoon wasn't some crude thing that she drew, it was a cartoon from a newspaper. Didn't say which newspaper that was, but satire is a long-standing aspect of our democratic discourse, and some satire can be offensive. The more I think about this, the more I think how absolutely insane it is. This person, Gregor Murray, sounds like not a particularly pleasant character themselves. And yet here they are playing victim. And the judge, it seems to me, is pandering to the trans lobby and the sort of victimhood narrative that they're promoting. Here's the thing. In this country, people have a legal right to have an operation to change their sex. But what we are seeing very clearly is a politicization and a controlling of language that is being used in a way that I think is very unhealthy, in a way that I think is an infringement of freedom of speech. And I know that critics will say, "Oh, you're using freedom of speech to justify bigotry." Well, here's my take on that. If, personally speaking, if I meet a trans person, I would use her preferred pronoun for the sake of politeness, because I would want to make them feel uncomfortable, and for the sake of just avoiding any hassle that comes with not using their preferred pronoun. But what, and that's okay, I don't have a problem with that. I would like to know the full context of this feud between Forstater Murray, because I suspect we may only be hearing one part of it. There have been cases before where women have been smeared as transphobic bigots when all they have done is stand up for themselves against aggressive trans activists. We're in a truly insane situation if we are now saying that the very statement, I mean, the fact that Rowling got in hot water for liking, not even making the tweet, but liking a tweet that said men cannot be women. Now, once upon a time, this was common sense. If you're born with a penis, you will never be a biological woman. Sex matters. Biology matters. If someone wants to identify as a woman, that's their business. I'm not going to pretend I understand it, but it's a right. Under our current legal system, that it's a right. Um, but I definitely think there is a totalitarian aspect to the trans lobby that firstly doesn't represent all trans people. There are trans people who do not want this sort of militant, intolerant faction to represent them, and yet the trans lobby, the people who are constantly pushing for criminalisation of words, um, they're being held up to be representatives of the whole transgender community, and I think that's misleading. Just like it's misleading for any one spokesperson to claim that they represent an entire community, whether that be the Muslim Council of Britain or some Jewish people who say that they represent all British Jews, or the SNP claiming they represent the Scots, or whoever it is. No one can claim to represent an entire community. So I think we need to challenge this idea that the trans lobby, those who are pushing, by trans lobby, I mean those who are pushing for the criminalization of thought, and that's what they're doing, um, as being representative of the whole trans community. I think the average transgender person just wants to be treated with respect and get on with their lives. I don't think they want this militant sort of attack on words. This situation where people who misgender someone are now being threatened with potentially criminal liability. That to me is chilling, actually. It's just an insane situation that's stating the simple fact that someone born with a penis, a man, look up the Oxford English Dictionary, cannot be a biological woman. If a trans woman wants to be referred to as a woman, okay, but what you cannot do is force people to think that you are in fact a woman in the conventional sense. And this is an area where I find myself in an interesting position because I've long been a long-standing critic of third wave feminism, and I remain critical of some of the double standards and misandry that they come out with. But on this issue, where they're fighting for the fundamental right to define themselves as biological women, I think that's a no-brainer. I'm absolutely on the side of those feminists. It's just a no-brainer. No woman should feel, be smeared because she's stating the obvious. Now, if someone's engaging in bullying, if they're harassing a trans person, if they're constantly calling them names, that's wrong, and I don't condone that. But I don't think that's what we're talking about here. I think that the bullying is actually coming from the trans lobby. I mean, there is implications to this, and it's not helpful to simply say, "Oh, well, 50 years ago there were, gay people were fighting for the rights." It's a totally different dynamic because with gay people, it was a case of fighting for the rights to be treated equally depending on who they loved, right? Due to sexual orientation. That didn't have any sort of dynamic in terms of what happens to, for example, the prison service. If you have, for instance, um, a male to female transitioned person who is then sentenced as a woman, and they're in a women's prison, and women inmates may feel uncomfortable about that. You know, the the old issue of gay rights, that's totally got nothing to do with that. It never had that sort of dynamic. And I'm not going to say that at the time there wasn't conservative forces against it. I've also seen the trans lobby compare their struggle to the civil rights movement. Again, black people were fighting for the right to vote. They were fighting for the right to be treated in a civil way. Trans people already have legal protection to be treated in a civil way. But what we are seeing is something else. We are seeing the criminalization of language itself, of terminology. Now, if someone comes out with some spiteful, vitriolic rant demonizing trans people, that is wrong, and I can see why that would be problematic, and I would not endorse that. Okay, no trans person should feel uncomfortable or feel like they're hated. But I am tired of the trans lobby playing the victim when they are doing a lot of the bullying themselves. And anyone who believes in common sense needs to, make make it clear where they die on this. I support J.K. Rowling. Now, if I become a public figure, does that mean 5, 10 years from now, someone will pick this up and say, "Oh, Nathan Hayes that supported J.K. Rowling, so he's a transphobic bigot"? To me, I mean, we have to fight this. We have to fight this move towards totalitarianism. That's what the whole Jordan Peterson thing was about. His fundamental issue was that it was being criminalized. Words were being criminalized. The idea that if you misgender someone, now what that should be is a situation of if the person feels they've been misgendered, as they would put it, then they can say something. Oh, that's offensive. Please don't refer to me that way. And then the person can say, "Oh, I apologize. It was a misunderstanding," and that should be the matter over. If someone persists, like for example, I wouldn't agree with if I knew there was a male to female transition person, I wouldn't call that person he. Out of politeness, I wouldn't see the point of just trying to work them up for the sake of it. But by the same token, that person cannot demand that I see him as a woman. I'm saying him here because I'm talking in this video. It's not a face-to-face situation. But I refuse to be brainwashed into thinking that a man can be a woman. A man cannot be a woman. Just can't. A man can have a transition and refer to himself in feminine pronouns, and we can respect that. That's the way that that person has chosen to live their life. But the whole thing about mispronouncing, there's another problem with that because we're not talking just he and she and they. We're now seeing a situation where the trans lobby is pushing for a whole range of other pronouns, zer and z, and if that becomes normalized, then we will truly be living in an upside down world. I mean, that would just be, firstly, it's practically difficult. I mean, LGBT, right, LGBTQ plus A plus, it's a mouthful. It just isn't practical and it is meaningless. It's utterly meaningless because you get these people who have taken gender studies or they're looking for new angles to look at things. But these are concepts that the vast majority of the public, including most of the LGBT community for that matter, are not endorsing. You look at any gay pride, most gay prides, it's not LGBTQ plus A, because gay and lesbian people, they also see this for what it is. It's getting ridiculous. I should say a lot of them see that, not all of them. Some of them will endorse that sort of. But if you're of the school of thought that there's 50 genders, are you honestly going to insist that people come out with 50 abbreviations? This sounds like hyperbole, but I honestly think that is the way that we're going. I hope that common sense prevails. But when someone can lose a job over sharing a newspaper article and excuse me, newspaper cartoon. I haven't seen it, but if it was published in a newspaper, it's going to be satire. Satire is by definition, provocative. That it's always been the way for 300 years. So if you're a trans person and you don't like the cartoon, I can understand that. I can understand trans people being hurt by that. But demanding that someone is fired from their job, to me, that is going too far. Just debate with a person, call them a bigot. Okay, call them a transphobic bigot. But this situation that we're seeing where people are being hounded out of their jobs, where they're being vilified on social media by the trans lobby, it's deeply concerning. But a lot of if you've got thick skin, you can put up with name calling, right? But what is truly dangerous here is the legal implications. We pride ourselves as being a society that values freedom of expression. We are not China. And yet, the trans lobby really have quite a totalitarian streak. They demand that only their point of view is valid. They demand that only their terminology is valid. Now, that is absolutely disturbing because if this is not really held to account, if this is not challenged, I honestly think we are going to get into a very dicey situation in the near future on gender issues. Well, we're going to see women being prosecuted more and more, and men, for simply stating what is true. And that to me goes well beyond holding someone to account because they've engaged in bullying. Again, I emphasize I do not support transphobic bullying, so I don't support someone being given a hard time just because they're transgender. What I'm arguing is it's the trans lobby that is doing a lot of the bullying.